Carlos Nelson with Cascade Media Group, and today we're going to be having another conversation on the behalf of children of incarcerated parents with Miss Toby Dorr out of Washington, D.C., or is it the D.C.
Yes,
Metro?
the DC metro area.
Okay. Welcome to the show, Toby.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Uh, Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you have been involved as it relates to incarceration and the program that Miss Barbara Courtney, how I met you through her
Mhm.
program, Children of Incarcerated Parents.
Okay, so in 2004, I started a prison dog program at Lansing Correctional Facility just outside of Kansas City. And I fell in love with one of my inmates, and in 2006, I helped him escape from prison. We went on the run for 12 days, and of course, we got caught. And I ended up with a 27-month prison sentence. And during that time, I realized, you know, so many of the women I was in prison with had children. I had children too, but my children happened to be adults. But that doesn't mean it didn't scar them or hurt them, my being in prison. In fact, it's they still have the effects of it today. And I think it's just tragic how many women are incarcerated in this country, really for nonviolent crimes. And it just rips families apart and it affects generations, and generations and generations. And I think that it's heartbreaking. I think that we should seriously look at some way to have other alternatives for a majority of these women who really aren't threats to society so that we can try to keep families together better. And in cases where that's not possible, I think it's critical to have some kind of a program like Barbara does to try to fill in the wounds in those children and fill in the gaps that having their parents away incarcerated leaves in their lives. So I'm thrilled to be a part of Barbara's group.
So, talk about what you do
So
in your program.
today I have a program for women. I have a series of workbooks where I walk them through personal development tools so that they can become stronger, more independent, and more emotionally healthy women. I have another program where they learn to be a part of a thriving, healthy community and how to give to a community and how to receive from a community with grace. Because a community is only as good as all the collective members of it. And for a lot of people, what gets us in trouble is the company we keep. So we need to learn how to find that right group to fit into that's going to push you forward in the world instead of drag you down. And then the third workbook is to help women who feel a calling to do something in the world, but they can't quite put a form to it. So it's just, a series of exercises and programs to help them define what it is that they're being called to do.
How did you find being incarcerated was as it relates to the facility, and where were you incarcerated at?
I was moved like 5 or 6 times in my 27 months. It was crazy. I was in the Leavenworth County Jail. I was in the Topeka Correctional Facility for Women. I was in CCA, which is a private for-profit prison in Leavenworth. And that is the stupidest thing in the world to have a for-profit prison because then humanity and the care of the inmates just goes out the window because what's important is the bottom line. I actually fell and broke my leg while I was in at CCA, and it was 10 days before they X-rayed it. And at the time they X-rayed it, it was broken so badly that the doctor needed to set it, but you can't set it after 10 days. I would have had to go to surgery, and they denied the surgery. So we just kind of had to cope with it the best we could. And I wasn't the only medical emergency malpractice that I experienced in that prison. One of my pod mates was burned very badly by some hot water bottles that exploded in the microwave. and they didn't take her to the hospital for 24 hours. And then the hospital they took her to, they put her on an ambulance and took her to the burn center at KU Med Center, and she was in the hospital for a week. And another woman who's one of my best friends there, she came to prison knowing that she had a tumor in her uterus, and she had been scheduled to have it removed the day after they picked her up and arrested her. And she begged them to let her go have her surgery, and then she'd come and turn herself in, but they wouldn't do it. And once she got to CCA, they did nothing for her tumor, nothing for her cancer. And after 9 months, her tumor ruptured, and it weighed 12 and a half pounds at the time it ruptured, and she nearly died. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So for-profit prisons are a, it's a sin against humanity. And then the last place I was at the federal prison in Houston, Texas. So I moved around, and in between I was at the Federal Transfer Center in Oklahoma City.
So what's your take on uh, the ability of these institutions to service? I'm saying you've been in a half dozen, I think,
Yes.
to service the needs of female prisoners.
You know, the needs of female prisoners are so different from the needs of male prisoners. I mean, I was a volunteer in the men's prison for 18 months, and I was inside that prison for 8 to 10 hours a day. So I really saw what a men's prison was like. And the women's prisons are nothing like the men's prisons. And the sad part is, you know, because the men are volatile and they'll riot and demand things. The men in Kansas, the men's prisons had cable TV. And the only employee who worked at the prison that was required to be on call 24 hours a day was the man who ran the cable TV station. Because if cable TV went out at 2 in the morning, he better get in there and fix it or they'd have a riot. So I went to the women's prison in Kansas, run by the same department, the Kansas Department of Corrections. The women's prison has no cable TV at all. And I believe it's because the women never stood up and demanded it and threatened, you know, violence if they didn't get it. So the way the women's prison was run was so different from the men's. There was not cable TV, there were no activities, there wasn't a gym, there were no uh, things for the women to do. I mean, we just sat around and watched TV or, you know, just sat in your room or played solitaire. There were no activities, there were no classes that I ever saw. So it was a totally different situation. And I think they just take advantage of the women because the women don't complain enough. They don't stand up for themselves enough. They're just willing to take whatever anybody, however anybody treats them.
How do you feel that the general public uh, perceives people that have been incarcerated? Do you think that the general public even this is an issue with them?
I it the most difficult thing in the world, I think, is to reintegrate into society once you come out of prison because there are places who won't rent to you if you have a felony. There are many places who won't hire you if you have a felony. You know, in the state of Missouri, where I lived for a little while, there's a state law that felons cannot sell lottery tickets. Now, that is just ridiculous. Felons can't sell lottery tickets, which means felons can't work in gas stations, grocery stores, convenience stores, Casey's, 7-Eleven. It takes all those jobs out of the market for felons. And those are the kind of jobs that normally you think they could fit into and work their way up. But the state bars them from having those jobs because they sell lottery tickets there. And it's just ridiculous, the restrictions that are put on people when they come out of prison.
Well, my roommate, bless his soul, deceased Alvin Sykes, he really was a freedom fighter for
Hmm.
the ills that are going on in the not only the federal correction but all of these facilities,
Yes.
along with Senator David Haley out of Kansas, have this has had been one of their main issues. What's going on in these penitentiaries because they're filled they're filled up with a lot of people of color, and
Yes, they are. So many people of color, so many underprivileged people. When I was in the federal prison, the majority of inmates there were from Mexico. They were Mexicans. So there is definite targeting of people who I think uh, the system feels don't have the resources to stand up and fight for themselves, and that's just not right. You know, a prison sentence should you two of the same crimes, the prison sentences should be similar, not just differ because someone can afford to have an attorney and someone has to have a public defender.
but
That
we
should
are in
never
America.
matter.
But we are in America now, and what you were talking about in relationship to these for-profit prisons,
Hmm.
uh, I have went to a seminar that my good friend Crosby Kemper had put on at the Kansas City Public Library about
Hmm.
12 years ago, and they had a speaker come in and he talked about America and how corporations run America and
Yes,
asked
they do.
the audience, did they know what emperors were? And
Hmm.
everybody knows what an emperor is.
Hmm.
All powerful, and these people that control these corporations, they're like emperors. Now,
Hmm.
with that being said, uh, now what is the objection of these corporations is profit. And
That's exactly right.
the same thing as you said with the prison. So it's profit above the planet. It's profit above anything on this plane, material plane. That
That's right.
so therefore, morality and other things don't even come into play because profit overrides everything.
That's exactly right. It certainly does. And you know, the United States has somewhere between 4 and 5% of the world's population, and we have 25% of the world's incarcerated population. Now, you can't tell me that America is more crime ridden than other countries. That's simply not true. What is true is that we have a country and a society that loves to put people in prison when something could be a better choice, you know, maybe a drug rehab program or
It,
a battered women's shelter. There's so many other places, there's so many other programs you could put people into. They don't have to go to prison if they're not a threat to society.
they have to go to prison. We just talked about that. It's
Yes,
profit being made
you're right. That's
all
right.
over slavery.
But ethically, they shouldn't have to go to
Uh,
prison.
ethically, there are no ethics in profit.
Well, you're probably right there. I'm sure
Once
you are.
people, once people start looking at things how they are, not how they want to be,
Hmm.
or I'm in media,
Yes.
not what the media is telling you how things should be. Use your damn common sense.
Hmm.
And most of us don't use our common sense.
That's
And
true.
and common sense, simple. Once you understand that everything in this nation evolves around a profit, the
Mhm.
law,
That's right.
everything, you can just look at the last president, what he represented, and look how many flocked to that banner.
Mhm.
So, and what is that banner really about? So, with that being said, would you have any closing words that you would like to impart to our audience?
Absolutely. And that is no one is their worst mistake. We all have the ability to rise above whatever brought us down and become someone who can make a difference in the world. And that's what we should focus on. And that's what prisons should be doing is training their inmates to be able to come out and accomplish that. Because the world wins if we all have something to give to the world. Nobody wins if we stay squashed forever.
I think that's appropriate. I think I'd like to have you back on the show uh, to go a little bit more in depth about once one is released. We just touched on
Hmm.
that.
Yeah, I would love to do that.
And let me say this: I tell my audience, see, I don't. I've been incarcerated and had different problems, and it's like it's no redemption. Why do time if I come out and I'm still a felon? I still can't vote. I still can't.
Hmm.
I got my voting right privileges back. But when we start talking about the average person,
Hmm.
and it's enough just being poor.
That is, you're right. And society tells us what they want from us to pay for our crimes. So when we've made that payment, we should be on an even slate, and we're not.
You holy really see the system's designed for you to go back into crime.
Yes, that
You
is.
if you can't have a roof over your head because they won't rent to you, if you can't get a job, what do?
That's right. That's
You go
exactly
back
right.
to jail,
Hmm.
vagrancy, all kinds of stuff. So with that
That's right.
being said, it was a plum pleasing pleasure having you on the
Well,
show,
thank you.
uh,
I enjoyed it.
Toby.
Yeah,
And as we always say in closing, uh, when you invest in your community, you're really just investing in yourself. Good night.
that's exactly right. And I just released my memoir a couple weeks ago, and that talks all about my whole journey through prison and rebuilding my life.
And
So,
if anyone wanted to contact you,
TobyDorr.com. And that's TobyDorr.com.
good night.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Uh, Toby,
Yeah.
so